All right. Well, let us officially begin. My name is Jackie Jones. I am the Community Engagement Manager for Create Birmingham and also CEO of One Degree. And what you are experiencing or about to experience is another episode, so to speak, of our community conversations. Today, we have a wonderful person with us who I will let him introduce himself. But just so that you know, the entire point of all of this is basically for us to have conversations with each other about things that pretty much we all have to think about, we all have to go through or figure out. And especially now, where we normally would do this in a more in-person way, so 2019, but we are doing this digitally, virtually, for the reason of bringing people together and having these conversations. So without further ado, I will allow Mr. Ed Fields to introduce himself.
Well, hey, good afternoon, Jackie. Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Ed Fields. I serve as Senior Advisor and Chief Strategist for the City of Birmingham. My friends and family call me Brother Ed. You can call me whatever you like, just call me. I'm glad to be a part of this. I know we'll get into a good part of our conversation. I'll explain a little bit more about my background as we go as well.
Okay. Sounds good. So you're just going to leave us hanging like that on the introduction? All right. So just so you know, if you're watching, I do have things pulled up here on Facebook. If you have questions and you put them in the chat, I can see it. Jessica Moody looks like she's there, our Director of Programs. So she is also in the Facebook Live. If you have questions here in Zoom, feel free to use the Q&A function. That would be great so I can see it flash. Or if you put it in the chat, I'll try to check that occasionally and get your comments or your questions addressed. So we are here to talk about assessing our lives in times of major change, which right now is absolutely a major change. It's something that we definitely could not anticipate. There's just no way. And so I'll start with my first question as, can you tell us what are the areas? Now, of course, let me preface this. On our call, we likely have entrepreneurs, artists, makers, small business owners. We're going to have a variety of people, right? People who own organizations, nonprofits. And so my first question to you would be, where do we begin with assessing our situation or figuring out kind of where our starting point is before we move forward with making changes? What are the important things for us to consider?
Sure. Well, before we do that, I want to thank you for the invitation. I know that this is a series for you and you're having these conversations. I want to acknowledge the fact that you're doing this in the midst of a time where people are really hungry and looking for points of reference. They're looking for anchors. They're looking for stable, good quality information and people and networks to connect with. And I just want to acknowledge you and Create Birmingham because you all sit in a very unique space in Birmingham, in a city that doesn't often embrace innovation at the rate and scale that it should. So you really serve a key function there. And on a personal level, I just appreciate your positive, witty, accessible disposition. Is really refreshing, and I'm wishing the best for you and for Create Birmingham and the entire team, Buddy, and everybody there. I also want to just say that I can relate to being a maker and an entrepreneur. I know I sit here as a damn government bureaucrat right now, but I want to give you a point of reference, y'all, that I do understand what it's like to be in this space as an entrepreneur creator. I did serve as a co-founder and leader of a company for 8 years down at the Innovation Depot, serving entrepreneurs as well in a lot of spaces. So I've been a part of that. The company was founded 1 year before the collapse of the Great Recession. So I also lived through trying to grow a company in that time. So I'll share some of that experience as it relates to what should we be assessing next and how do we not only get back on track, but also benefit greatly. This is a truly leapfrog opportunity for some of us. For others of us, it might be a real gut check for us to consider doing something different. And that's just a reality for those of us who are entrepreneurs and makers. And I also am a calligrapher by trade, so I can appreciate the artistic space.
Oh, wow. That coming.
Yeah, I'm a calligrapher. That's how I actually helped me get through college, was paying off debt. That was my first company, was my calligraphy business. So I know what it's like to try to just make it happen with your raw talent and your energy, and then to put systems around there to try to make it a real viable business. And it doesn't always work, but I will tell you, to answer your question directly, the first place we have to start is the first place we began with, which is, who is our customer? Who are we serving? And getting really razor sharp and clear about how they are being impacted, how their behaviors are changing, what they need may be changing in the seismic way. So that's the best place to start, is really thinking about your customer. I was at a entrepreneurial workshop once, and there's a gentleman named Mel Gravely. You should check him out. He's written multiple books. He has an institute called the Entrepreneurial Institute. He's an engineer by trade, but he's created this space. He does these high-powered workshops. He came into Birmingham with about 12 people through Bob Dickerson's organization. And he asked one question to these 12 entrepreneurs, most of whom already have businesses and were in a space to really grow. And he asked, so what's the number one reason for being in business? And this was, again, these were people who had businesses already. And we all went around and answered the question, but nobody answered the question perfectly. And you would think that there is no perfect answer. I start my business for the reasons I start my business, but there is a perfect answer. And that perfect answer is to add value to people's lives. That's it. That is what all successful businesses do. So get back to the basic. Why are you even in business? Who are you actually serving? And what does their reality look like now? The reality is this could be a bump in the road for some of you. And for others, this could be something altogether different that creates new opportunities or really helps illuminate a path that you can see is closed so that you stop wasting your time and money. So start with the customer, really get intimate, find out what's going on with them, surveying, polling, picking up the phone and talking to people. I will tell you, and from our perspective, even though we're not a small entrepreneurial enterprise, we have an end user and end customer, and two of them really. One of them are businesses, people like you on the phone, on this line, but also our residents, our ultimate end users, who are customers of our customers in some regard, or direct customers of the city. And so one of the first things that we did when the crisis took place was we got the mayor list of people to call, people who are in close proximity, like his small business committee members, neighborhood leaders. But we also produced lists of folks who had already maybe been disenchanted by this city government, or people who are really excited by it. And we mashed them all up and we gave them to the mayor on a list and let him just start calling. And through that, he became really better informed about how people might feel about our policy positions like face coverings, or about curfews, or really just in terms of messaging in a way that really resonates with people because of what they said they wanted to hear, not what a bureaucrat sitting in his office thinks they want to hear. So get really intimate with your customers would be the best place to start.
I totally agree. And that's something that we try to remind people all the time, whether they're just getting started or kind of pivoting or evolving, that kind of thing. And would you, and so kind of a follow-up to that, I wonder though, as you begin to go through that process, and I know a lot of us who are trying to figure out what our new audience's pain is or what's on their mind, what I found, or what a lot of people that we've talked to have found, is that some people don't know, right? So if I, as an example, if I'm a person who provides some type of service to a parent and that parent just has not figured out yet what their life is going to be like, and they're very up and down because of the changes, and they have to homeschool and they have to all of this other stuff, a lot of them really did not have a clue. So how do you feel like people can glean things when maybe your audience doesn't even know what they need right now? Do you just go with the people who have some idea, or do you hear those frustrations and kind of try to put yourself in a way of problem solving with them?
I don't think that there is a perfect answer to that question, because it's a really good one. What do you do when you're not sure what to do because your customer doesn't know what they want? This is what makes this an existential crisis for so many of us. So I'll share a couple of thoughts that may help some folks. First, the way my mind works is I tend to think about things almost in a perpendicular way, meaning that I'm not looking for the information straight ahead. I'm going to look for other relevant points of information that might help inform my perspective. So let me give you a couple of examples of that. Last November, I read this book here by Simon Sinek. It's called The Infinite Game. This is the same guy who wrote Leaders Eat Last and Start With Why. I really encourage you all to consider this book. He has a couple of notes in here that I thought were really powerful, and some of them may not be highly relevant, but I'll share one that is still relevant today. He talks about, in one of his chapters, existential flex. So I'm going to just read for you what the definition of existential flex according to Simon Sinek, and then I'm going to share an example of someone who really, really embraced the idea that we have to be prepared to be something different. And so Sinek says existential flexibility is the capacity to initiate an extreme disruption to a business model or strategic course in order to effectively advance a just cause. So there's more to be said there. This fundamentally assumes that you have a vision that you're driving toward,
right,
and that the course that you set forth may not stay the same. The difference between somebody being impacted by COVID-19 and someone who is impacted by COVID-19 but has already been thinking about how to disrupt or how to live through disruption is pretty significant. He uses the example of Steve Jobs, who was considering GUI at one point when the company was already deeply invested in another direction. So graphical user interface was a new concept that he really wanted to invest in. And his leadership team at Apple were already tens of millions of dollars in investment in another direction on another project. And they effectively said, Steve, if we do this, we're gonna destroy the company. He simply replied, it's his folklore, but they said that he replied and said, well, it's better that we do it than someone else. Basically saying, if the company's gonna be broken, we gotta start breaking it and finding out how we could put it back together as the market demands the need. So the same applies here. If you were to break down your entity, your personal life or your professional business, what would be the essential pieces that you know you have to keep? That is a process, y'all. I don't know that that's something you sit down and do in one day. I really think that you've got to get really honest about what value you're adding. And I'm going to tell y'all, there's a lot of people right now that are really being revealed. There's a lot of people who have been resting on laurels. They've been resting on a family's last name. They have been resting on, an extra padding and savings. They've been resting on a lot, not necessarily proving that they're delivering value to the market every day. This is the advantage for the maker and for the fledgling entrepreneur. If you're actually adding value, that's going to be a lot more obvious today because people will not be as irrational with their distribution of their dollar. They're going to be a lot more discerning about how that dollar moves. Excuse me, that's my fault. About how that dollar moves. And so I would say that you want to start with what you know, and what you know may be very, very limited, as well as your customers, for a short time, but not for perpetuity. If anything else, you could be looking at what you know they are doing. Are they shopping online for groceries? Are they having them delivered, or are they going to do pickup? There's so many other points, data points that we could use. The other is, of course, just scanning the environment more vigorously. Many of us count on our intuition and our proximity to customers to be able to know what they want. In this case, that's very hard to do, both physically as well as you're indicating, the customer may not know. But macro trends are pretty evident, and we are seeing how people are or are not showing up, no pun intended, as it relates to restaurants, for instance, during this crisis. Are people actually going to restaurants or are they not? Well, in this market, we don't really know because it's just brand new. But we can see what's happening in Italy, in Germany, and other places that have dealt with the opening or perhaps didn't even close in different ways. So I would say look at macro data. It's available in a lot of spaces, and it may not be specific to your industry, but it could be for a related industry.
That's good. That's all really, really, really good. Really, really good. Just because I feel like someone's going to ask, say the name of the book again that you held up and that you read from for us.
Yes, it's called The Infinite Game, and it's written by Simon Sinek.
All right.
Sinek.
I feel like someone's going to ask that question. And so, of course, there will be a replay and you can go back and rewind it, but just in case you wanted to write it down right now. Also, I think someone just put it in the chat, so thank you so much. So we start with, you know, our audience, the people who we're serving, the people who are adding value to, at what point, or at some point, I assume at some point, we're going to have to look internally at who we are, you know, who our team is. Can you talk a little bit to us about what is it that we need to ask ourselves as it pertains to our internal state, as we consider these, whatever, you know, the new path is going to be? What should we be asking ourselves about our internal self, whether that be personally or professionally, as we decide how we're going to move forward?
I want to focus on the personal because we're talking about entrepreneurs and smaller organizations for the most part. And this situation has made things so primal, from my perspective, so primal that even for larger organizations, people are having to consider the most basic of, it's like going to Maslow's hierarchy and really like getting into every single level of what we really need. There's a great movie by Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate, I think it's Kate Winslet, the duo from Titanic. It's called Revolutionary Road. It was a period piece about a young suburban couple that were just trying to make their way professionally and personally in life. They were social climbers, and it was a pretty heart-wrenching story, but there was a part in there when they were struggling in their marriage. And he did inventory and other product work for IBM in the 1940s. And so DiCaprio is sitting in his office late one night. He's frustrated in his marriage. He's trying to rise in the ranks at IBM, and he's doing dictation in his recorder. And he just has this very profound moment where he says, to know what you have, period, to know what you want, period, and to know what you can't live without, period, that's inventory control. And it was just this very well done scene that it just lands perfectly, that nexus between his personal and professional. The point he was driving is really understanding what it is that you cannot live without. And so I would say a couple of things to this group. First, your entrepreneurial enterprise is serving some sort of function for you. It is a revenue or income generator. It is helping you actualize to become more the person you want to be. It is a service mechanism, particularly for makers and creators and social impact leaders. It solves for many things for us. I would say this is an opportunity now to get really honest and to really know this is what you want to do. I'll never forget the year that I ultimately moved out of our business. I went over to Alabama Media Group. We sold the company, transitioned out staff and clients. It was a very profound moment, but it was very clear. All that year I had been in prayer about what I would do since my business partner had moved on to another area of interest. Well, it became very clear to me that having a business partner is something that's really important to me personally, not just functionally, but personally. That's not something I expected to come to. There's not a truth that I thought I actually believed in until I explored it further. So I would say this is an opportunity to get really honest. There's a couple ways to get really honest. First, if you don't journal, it's free, right? So start journaling and start externalizing what you're thinking and feeling. Super important, and it's not too late to start doing that. And there's no prescription, it's just started. Two, mental health resources are becoming more evident and available in this particular time. We don't talk enough about being an entrepreneur, but a big part of running a business is the emotional game. It's not just the technical pieces, it's the emotional game, your own, and then managing those around you. It can be exhausting, and you rarely have capacity and time, as you do right now, to get down and really harness that energy and redirect it and refocus it. So I think that that's super important. And the last thing I would suggest is just make sure you are doing what you can to have healthy behavior, healthy outlets. This is also a time where people fall back into addictions or just very unhealthy lifestyles to cope with the situation. A couple months ago, I actually took advantage of our EAP program here at the city. Really, it was a New Year's resolution. I just want to just get better in all ways. was going to get an executive coach to actually add to my skills and refine my path. And on the other, I actually just want to find out what else is there, because life seems to be pretty good. But if I want to get better and be the leader I want to be, I've got to get clear about everything that I can get clear about. And it was interesting, because by the time I had my first session with him, he started asking me questions about how COVID-19 was impacting me, which for me has actually been okay. But when he asked that question, it dawned on me that there's so many people that are not okay, that mental health professionals may be seeing an uptick, and they certainly have these protocol questions that they're asking about how the crisis is impacting them. I can't think of a more vulnerable population than some of the people that are on here now, running small organizations that probably are producing services that are in need, but with even fewer resources. That's a lot of pressure and strain. So that's a very long answer to the question, but I don't think we're having honest enough conversations about how the crisis is impacting us in our organizations. And I just want to give you all permission to get vulnerable, however you need to do that, both first with yourself, if you have an accountability partner, to engage that accountability partner, and then ultimately to be clear about the path that you're on. If the path that you're on is something that you have been questioning, that you have been unsure of, this is now the time to potentially move away from that uncertainty and move towards something that feels more naturally right. And guess what? There's so many people going through that right now. You kind of have cover in a way that you never had before. So take advantage of it.
So very, and I'm so glad to hear you bring that to the forefront, because even before all of this, I personally have always been an advocate for people remembering that you are a person first. Before you are anything else, before you're any other title, wear any other hat, you do have to take care of yourself. And not enough people in professional spaces or as entrepreneurs or any upwardly mobile aspect of life where you are, trying to be ambitious, working through obstacles, overcoming things over and over and over again. Rarely do we hear the words, hey, take care of yourself, keep your own mental health at the forefront. We just don't get that enough. And so I'm so happy to hear you say that, especially when you think about, just assessing where you are. You can't forget to, in assessing your business and assessing, what you're going to move forward with, or pivoting and all of that, and not actually assess the core of all of that, which is you. So I'm very, very happy to hear you talk about that. So thank you for that. Also, when we think about that, and when we think about ourselves and trying to navigate that, I do wonder, if you are a maker or an entrepreneur, small business owner, and you're on this call, or even leader of an organization or involved in an organization, you find that as you start to make these steps forward, we think about like all the things that are coming from government, all the restrictions, how they're changing, and you start to move forward, and you have to figure out, okay, what's the next step? Inevitably, we make mistakes, right? And that's in life in general. But right now, we may be a whole lot more afraid to move forward because of the potential of those mistakes. And that fear kind of always exists, especially with business owners. I know for me, I'm always afraid something's gonna fall apart. But I always say the most successful people are the people who do it in the face of fear. It's like, hey, fear, if you're gonna be there, that's cool, but you're gonna have to ride with me. I'm not gonna stay here while you paralyze me. And so people who can push through that are normally the people who are able to, who can learn to push through it, because it does not come with the package, I don't think. But the people who can learn to push through that are usually the most successful. But when you're in this place where things are so much more polarized, how do you move forward with the idea that, man, if I make a mistake right now, I'm already in an unstable place with my business or with my venture, with my organization? What do you say to people who are considering, I may make some horrible mistakes, and if I do, how do I handle that?
Yeah, so let me just tell y'all, fidelity to the mission. Again, Simon Sinek refers to it, just cause. And by the way, this is a business book that I'm referring to. It's business. This isn't some fluffy service thing. This is, hey, if you are in the game of business, sometimes we forget, we get so focused on the mission statement and the technical pieces that in the fancy words that we forget, what is the cause? One of the reasons that I feel that we've been successful in the Woodfin administration has been that we've actually been driving toward a cause. Everything that we're doing, irrespective of what it looks like in moments, we stay focused. We don't get distracted. If the mayor seems like he's on point, it's because he's got his eyes on the prize. This is not fledgling. This isn't, short-term politicking. What is it we're fundamentally trying to change? And if you got something in you that's actually really compelling you in one direction or another, you got to let that fire loose. That to me is going to be a real source of strength. And yes, absolutely, mistakes will be made. I would say this, to the contrary, if you are doing something of great significance, then you better have a failure rate. You better have a failure rate. If somebody tells me that they're doing something really great and they're not acknowledging, and they don't have to proactively acknowledge, but when probed, acknowledging the fact that some things that they've done have not worked out, then there's only two truths in there, y'all. They're either lying or they actually haven't really done anything of significance, because you will have a failure rate. Thanks. And I'm proud of it. I think it's super important. Thing is, you don't want to make fatal flaws. And in business, we talk about a fatal flaw is an action that you take that fundamentally cripples your ability to do something with the resources you have. So yeah, you can make critical mistakes. If you decide to go out there and over leverage your business and then you have a failure, you fundamentally can't get back on track in that business. That doesn't mean that you can't go and do another business, but that fatal flaw may very well kill what you're doing right now. Question is it worth it? I mean, this is, the story I gave you about Steve Jobs, that wasn't small change. He literally could have killed the company. Now, we know that Steve Jobs, by reputation, was a different kind of dude. Most of us are not like Steve Jobs. But we all got a little Jobs in us, meaning that we take risk in all kinds of areas with the crappy food that we eat or with some of the crappy people that we hang out with because they're fun and it feels good. We take calculated risk all the time. I think that we should do that in business. However, we've got to find where those spaces are really, really going to hurt us. Let me give you, at this point, I want to share with you a little bit about how we handled assessment when we came into the city of Birmingham. Okay. And I'm going to do a quick screen share. It won't take long, but let me give you the context. When we came into office, the mayor basically had a mandate for change. I mean, people wanted something different, and they demonstrated that with their feet and their vote. And he had a lot of bright ideas as well. So he brought a bunch of people into the process. We had a transition team, and all that was cool. I could tell you a million things about all that. But we also did something else that we talked about, but really didn't become a big conversation. We hired a firm to conduct a performance assessment. Now, you may not have money to go out there and hire somebody to go into your whole business and look at everything that is inefficient, because a performance assessment, similar to a performance audit, except an audit's held to a standard by a certifying body, an assessment where somebody would come into the organization to determine how your operations and finances and staffing are aligned with your model. Are you over or undersubscribed with employees? Capital, are you over or undercapitalized, meaning overcapitalized, meaning that your money's inefficient in the wrong places? And I can go on and on and on. So we actually hired a firm to come into the city to look at 9 different departments and to provide recommendations. They actually did this over a course of 60 days. They interviewed all of our department heads. They did a lot of secondary research. They looked at other cities in several categories and came back with some great recommendations. All 33 of those recommendations are actually available to you right now. If you go to birminghamal.gov/strategy, you will find our page featuring not only our strategic plan, but our performance assessment. We did this at the very beginning of the administration. Let me tell you why it's so important. And I actually shared an update with our department heads earlier. I wasn't going to share this with you all, but I'll share it with you because it's not a secret, but it's information you probably.
Thank you.
You're VIP. Look, I want to make this special for you, but it actually is public information. It's available on that website, birminghamal.gov/strategy. And man, when you dig into it, it's actually really interesting stuff. Some of it we've actually done. So really nerdy things like, hey, y'all have 10 different code enforcement mechanisms in the city of Birmingham. This is one of the things we learned. So if you got a street on a block, you got a block and there's a car sitting on blocks, there's an overgrown lot, there's a roof caving in, and 2 or 3 other things all on one street, we literally would have to have different people from different departments all go down that street. And you know that they weren't coordinated because they weren't in the same department. So it could be a year before one street saw significant pieces of blight or things that impact the quality of life actually addressed. It's been that way for years. Nobody's really looked to coordinate it. Well, a year ago, we finished coordinated code enforcement. So now all the people, we didn't fire anybody, but each one of those individual inspectors can now effectively tag or submit citations for all of those. So just imagine what the impact is for the individual resident.
Right.
This was all information that we got from the performance assessment. And there were a number of them. The screen share I want to do with you is the bubble chart that shows you all of the 33 recommendations in these quadrants. And I really like this because I think that this could be applicable for us as entrepreneurs and creators, that we could take the same model and think about a few things. So I'm going to go ahead and share this.
Okay.
Okay. So what you see here is a bubble chart and prioritization timeline. There's some small words here that you won't be able to read, and that's okay. What I really want to share with you is, oh, you can't see my cursor, so I want to talk you through it. First of all, I want you to know that the different color bubbles relate to different departments. So the yellow is our finance department and the different recommendations from the performance assessment firm. The light blue is human resources. The gray is information technology. And the blue is optimization and reorganization. It's another slight different take on human resources. And I'm purposely not talking you through the 33 recommendations because that's not what we're really here to do. But it's important for you to know that as you're considering the status of your business and where you are, that you look at the key functions that really represent both your major expense categories and your major revenue drivers, or at least assets that could be leveraged into revenue, things that perhaps you're not selling right now that you could be selling. And so what you see here on the upper left in quadrant 1 are really high impact recommendations. These may be complex recommendations like shutting down a whole division or department at the city or standing up a whole new division. But they're short time frames to implement. So these are things that we may be able to control readily and quickly. To the far right, upper right is quadrant 2, high impact activity, but longer to implement time frames. So for instance, number 2 is addressing the structural deficit in the general fund, which is a whole technical thing where a lot of people won't even agree that there is a deficit because year over year, our revenue and expenses are pretty well in line, but there's underlying issues here. They're suggesting that if we get through those, it will take a couple years, but it'd be really, really high impact and freeing up resources for us to move the city forward. On the bottom left of quadrant 3, you can see low impact, short time frame to implement changes that could be done very quickly. So for instance, their recommendation is outsource the print shop and promote more electronic communications. Well, we certainly have not taken them up on that, but you can see how that could be something that we could do relatively quickly, but we wouldn't save more than about $500,000 doing that. Some of these other recommendations near the top toward the right, these could potentially have tens of millions of dollars of impact in the long term, including pension, including bond rating, capital available to really deploy back into services for residents. And quadrant 4 would be low impact, longer time frame to implement items. So it's called a bubble chart. It's a standard chart used in MBA or business programs. Consider just going online, looking at a bubble chart or looking at this one and taking this concept and doing an overlay with your business to see how it might be relevant for you.
Such great information. And, you know, we often talk about kind of time management in this way for individuals and like how you're spending your time and how that relates to the payoff. And that's exactly, you know, what that does. And of course, you know, for yourself, this is something that I had to learn during all of this, actually, is that sometimes you have to make these assessments for your personal life, and you have to make them for your business or for your organization. And so thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for also, explaining it, because the first time you pulled it up, my brain was like, no, thank you. Whatever he just showed you, don't try to process it. So thank you for explaining that. And that's just good information. And I hope that, as we finish this, that people will go back and really listen to how those quadrants work, because that helps you prioritize the changes. And you brought that word up, change, which I know is a big buzzword and a key word for kind of everyone, but especially for the city. But my question now is what do you feel like is the hardest part, the most challenging part of change? And especially now, because, we are all in a change of some sort. Whether we want to embrace that or not is a whole other community conversation, but we are all in some type of change. But what would you say is the most challenging aspect of change?
Well, on a personal level, it is resetting expectations. So that's personal work that we have to do. And I think it really does start there. I'm presuming that everybody watching this is a leader in some form or fashion in their businesses, in the civic community, or in their families. And you've got to be the first person to adjust to the environment. Otherwise, you can't expect other people to do that well. So modeling good behavior is something that we talk about all the time with the mayor and the rest of the team. And at any moment where people perceive that there's a breach in the modeling of good behavior, we did a social post, and he and Counselor Hunter Williams seemed to be standing too close. And I guess they must have done one of these. I don't know what they did with their face coverings, but people pay really, really close attention to the leader's fidelity to adjusting to change and to see that happen. So first, start with you. The second thing is this. I'm just going to stay on the theme of Steve Jobs because it seems to be working well for this discussion. But I like to think about the iPhone. If Apple surveyed 1 million people, nobody would have said, we need an iPhone.
Right.
Nobody knew what the heck an iPhone and an iPod was. Think about that for a second. Nobody asked for the freaking iPhone. It was somebody who was really tuned into what people really need and then building something that would really appeal to people. This is the hard work that a lot of us don't really want to do. We just want the sexy benefit of it, but really getting inside of an issue, understanding what it is that people may actually need. And then somehow, and this is the art of it, I don't presume to know. If I did, I probably wouldn't be on this Zoom right now. It's actually making that connection with people en masse, right? Communicating that to people en masse. I don't know that we can all do that en masse, but we can reach people where they are. And so I am a fan of iterative communication, meaning that you come up with a communication point or a product point, and you share that with someone somewhere, you get feedback, and you take that feedback and you either make modifications or you simply do more of what you're already doing because it's being affirmed by the market itself. So one of the things that we've done here at the city is something really basic. And I want to reference and give a shout out to my mayor because he's one of the most effective communicators you will meet in a very strange way, because he always talks about communicating with the fifth grade so that a fifth grader could understand it. And he often asks people to talk to him like he's a fifth grader, effectively encouraging people to really make it plain, to make it basic, and then to just drill the same thing over and over. So there is something to be said about being visible and being vocal and being consistent as a leader, particularly as an entrepreneur, so that your customers are reassured that you are thinking about them and working towards solutions for them. I think that is super important. And that doesn't require a whole lot of technical prowess. That really just requires you to be intentional about connecting with people.
What do you feel like? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What do you feel like the impact of that advice is on your peers? Because I know we're talking about the impact on our audience or our customers or the people who we're leading, but for those who stand beside us, do you feel like that same thing, how you communicate, being consistent, that applies and it has some impact to our circle and our network?
Oh, yes. Well, certainly is reaffirming. We can't assume that the people in our network, because they're standing next to us, even our peers, know what we know or feel what we feel. And so I think that this is truly where our humanity comes to the fore, and that everybody has something to offer. I believe that. I fundamentally believe in the power of the human will. I think it's God's greatest gift to us, and that we all have some value. This is one of those primal moments where everybody in the tribe can contribute. Everybody can contribute. And I think we owe it to ourselves and our peers to walk with an assumption that they can, and maybe even challenge us to show up as if we can and we will, be an addition and not a subtraction.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. Because I think that's really important. A lot of times, especially right now, I think a lot of people are looking around, to see, okay, what are they doing? What is our city doing? What are my neighbors doing? What are people in my industry doing? And as we look around, we have to remember some people are looking around at us as well. And so,
That's
just
right.
have to be an example for the people who see us kind of higher up in some capacity. There are people who are right beside us who are looking like over to see, how we're handling things. Or even if we're just being transparent, like we were talking about earlier, even if we're just saying, hey, you know what, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. I've heard people say I'm grateful for this break. Like this is the break I never would have taken. And so I'm just going to embrace that and just, yes, I'll be thinking about my business and what I'm going to do next, but I'm just going to be grateful for the fact that things slowed down and I didn't have to make the decision to slow them down. And I know people are looking around at that. So that's a really important thing to consider, and a really good point. So I'm going to maneuver to my last question so that others can ask questions, and then I will give you some time here at the end to just give any last thoughts that you have. But my last question, just about assessing and making change in general, and as we look to move forward out of these very challenging, very unique times, how often should we be making assessments of our situation and where we are? And the main reason I ask this, let me just say, is because especially business owners, especially entrepreneurs, and especially creatives, because I too am a creative. I cannot do calligraphy, let's be clear, but I too am a creative. But I know that we a lot of times get stuck in the planning phase. We get stuck in, okay, here's what it would look like, the vision of it all. And so, yes, assessment is great, but how often should we realistically be saying, hey, let me pause and really look around before I move forward?
Quarterly.
That was the most direct answer I have ever given. Can you do it again? Say it again.
You're so silly. Quarterly. You should be doing an assessment of where you are quarterly. And the best thing that you can do, even as individuals, is to have what we call colloquially a kitchen cabinet, otherwise known in the business world, an advisory group. And you should not just be doing that on your own. I think that is almost dangerous for people who are already doing so much on their own. So offer somebody a $5 Starbucks card, or write them a very nice note. Yes, she likes coffee too. The reality is this, y'all. We're not going to figure it out on our own. We couldn't do it before, and we certainly cannot do it now. Right. So I just really want to implore people to do the opposite of what many of us are doing. I posted on LinkedIn the other day the poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, We Wear the Masks, which is really about how we as humans are hiding behind, it's kind of obvious we wear the mask. We're all presenting some other form of ourselves. I thought that it was a very appropriate poem given the nature that many of us are now wearing face coverings. Right. So I know that many of us are hiding behind our face coverings and our screens, and we're trying to figure things out quietly, suffering, or maybe even just enjoying our Netflix binges. Whatever is going on with you, okay, but it's just you. I want you to turn that inside out and build a team and work with a team. I've got a post I'm going to share on my business, on my strategy blog soon. And it's really about this idea that we've got to find ways to partner with other people. And so I spent 10 years working with venture capitalists in Birmingham, Alabama. And while I've never been a venture capitalist and I've had some engagement in that space, there's one primary truth that is very clear to me. The biggest lessons I took out of working with those VCs after 10 years is this: smart money never moves alone. It never moves alone. You think it moves alone. It does not move alone. It always either has a team of funders or a team of talent operators who actually get things done. Who is your team? And there are not enough people who ask people to help. I have every thank you card that I've ever received since I've worked here at the city. And I think I have some from my previous life as well, because while I feel really good about the quality of the work that I've done, people don't write thank you notes. People don't call for informational interviews. People don't call just to pick one's brain nearly as often as they should. And Tim Ferriss tells that story very well in 4-Hour Workweek about the challenge he would issue to students at Harvard when he'd go there as a guest speaker, or some university as a guest speaker. And he'd encourage them to call or reach the most famous person that they could think of. And he would offer $1 million to whomever could actually achieve the goal. But most of them never actually called Oprah or Michael Jordan or anyone of that nature, because they always figured it was too big. So in the meantime, you had a full classroom of people that were all trying to reach the CEO of LinkedIn, or trying to reach somebody that might be more accessible, really big, but accessible. And there you are in the crowded middle, as opposed to stretching yourself and getting beyond what you think is possible by engaging people that rarely ever get touched. So what I'm saying to you is that if you are offering value to the world and you know that that value is perceived by people, engage. You have a fan base, baby. Go engage a fan base. Everybody has one. Go engage your fan base. It could be an uncle and aunt. It could be somebody that you serve as a customer, or it could be a vendor of yours that you have high regard for. Perhaps they're far more mature in business. Get those folks, get on a quarterly call or an annual call, rotate them in and out, and get really good information. To me, assessments are not just about self-assessing. They are about a team helping you assess where you and your business is. Katricia and I are going to share with you, Jackie, a document called Paint the Walls. It's a strategic framework by Dr. Lonnie Strickland, the legendary strategy professor from the University of Alabama. I have this Word document. I'm not going to post it here. They're going to have to do a follow-up with you to whatever capture you have for email or whatnot, and we'll provide that. You can provide that to your followers. Okay. Awesome. It'll be a very helpful document for some people who said they didn't want to hear all the blah, blah, blah about mental health. They really just want to know, give me some 1, 2, 3 steps on doing an assessment. Fine. We have a document for you, but you're going to have to get it from Miss Jackie Jones.
There you go. You got to see me. Come see me.
Right.
And shout out to Katricia for the link in the chat with the assist on the blog. For those who are here in Zoom with us, I can't put it in Facebook right now. If Jessica is here, I will ask that she does that. We'll copy and paste that over. So we have some questions that I want to get answered. Before we go, we have about 10 minutes. Great timing. And so someone asked where they can get the book from and what chapter in the book you read from. I will assume the first answer to that is all places that sell books. Might at least be able to order it. No, seriously, don't laugh. Still, they might at least be able to order the book.
All places that sell books. Yes, chapter 11. Chapter 11, Existential Flex. He also has, he did one of the most popular videos on YouTube about millennials. Simon Sinek is legendary. You won't always agree with him, but he has also broken down chapters of this book and created them on YouTube for those who want the Cliff Notes.
Nice. I will be taking that option because the way my schedule is set up.
Right.
All right. So we have a question here from Buddy. Buddy Palmer is our president and CEO at Create Birmingham. I hope he didn't mind me saying who it was from. It's too late now. Hi, Ed. We're so appreciative of your time with us today. Yes, we are. I have 2 questions, one relating to entrepreneurs and one for the city, and both relating to the idea of extreme, quotes, extreme disruption. In Sinek's book, One, in Sinek's book, one, do you have thoughts about risk versus reward for entrepreneurs at the time when reward is unknowable? And two, emerging from the pandemic, are there areas of operation in which the city is considering extreme disruption? If not, why not?
I'll take part two first. Yes, there are areas that we're considering extreme disruption. I was going to say dysfunction. We've already been through that phase. Yes, and I will tell you, buddy, and for everyone listening, you can actually see some of those ideas in this document that I shared with you earlier, the performance assessment, the link that Katricia is sharing here, and that hopefully will be shared on Facebook as well. In that performance assessment, you will see some pretty radical recommendations in addition to some pretty tame recommendations. They're all common sense, however. And then I can just tell you from daily personal interaction with the mayor, this is a unique opportunity for us to really modernize our city and to challenge us all, meaning our own team members, members of other parts of this government, and residents to reconsider how we do business on everything from, and you know about the City Hall pilot program right now and operating in, I think, 4 neighborhoods where we're doing once a week trash pickup and curbside recycling in large bins that were purchased. And we're looking for the results of that effort. We're looking for the data, which was just presented today from James Fowler about our VIA pilot, where we're doing flexible transportation, flexible public transportation. So we were already trying different things. This is the importance of existential flex. This is not about finding a moment to do this. This is about creating a culture where disruption is accepted. That also means that failure is going to have to be accepted. And I know we don't talk about that a lot, but internally, I know I have that conversation with our teams all the time. And while I'm sure that our boss absolutely doesn't want us failing all over the place, he does want us to do a lot. We have a very ambitious agenda. And there have been things that just haven't worked out like we wanted to. And you know what? That's okay. We can communicate about those. People will appreciate being brought along in the process. And I want to help, communicate that for people who are more curious about that.
Absolutely.
Oh, the first part of the question, which was about risk versus reward for entrepreneurs that don't know what the reward is. Maybe I don't understand the question, but if I do understand it as it's read, I don't think you take actions that you aren't clear about the benefit of. You got to be able to calculate to some extent risk versus reward. So I'm a man of faith. When people say stepping out on faith, that I know that means different things to different people, but let me tell you what it means to me. It means you pray and then you work. It don't mean pray and then step. It means pray and then work, meaning you've got to actually do the work to determine what the potential reward is. You got to know the size of your market. You got to know how much your market's willing to pay for your product or service. You got to know what are the cost inputs to being able to produce that product or service. And there's no shortcut on that. That is the work. And that's what separates those who actually benefit from being an entrepreneur and being a creator in the market and those who don't. And if you're not attached to Create Birmingham already, they have great models and modules for taking you through how to monetize your creativity and your creative efforts in your business. I encourage you to get involved with their programs. They're pretty great.
Y5 for
Those starters.
Pray and then do the work, because that's really important. All right, so our next question is, are you meeting one-on-one with members of your kitchen cabinet or attempting to gather everyone together? And that's from Trey.
Everybody does it differently. I will tell you, when I was in business, it turned out to be the best thing that I ever could have done in the business. There's probably a couple other things that we did okay. That would by far was, I wasn't able to calculate the value. But let me give you a couple of my insights on this, because I do have strong feelings about advisory councils and advisory boards particularly for small business owners, but really for anybody that's trying to do something transformational. First is this. Yes, it can be beneficial for you to put everybody in the room at once. If you are going to take that approach, you should really have a couple of prerequisites. First of all, you should not have a lot of people. I would not have more than 5 people in your group, 7 at most. It's just an administrative burden as well. You get a lot of benefit, but you got to actually steward that. Those are relationships
Right.
that you do not want to come to half-stepping. Somebody asked me to be on an advisory council. You better have your stuff together when I show up. It's super important to me. The other thing for me, I guess the best thing that I did in that scenario was I made sure that the people who were on my advisory council could add value to one another. So I actually had the VC who actually provided some funding for my firm, my accountant who was in Inslee, two people who would have never been in the same space, but both absolutely financial minded and both very civic minded, but from different perspectives, and several other people. So the combination of that, you become your own network. You literally become your own membership organization of sorts, and you're the ticket. You're the price of admission. So your group should add value to one another, not just to you. I think that's how you create a dynamic scenario that can keep people interested and keep them at the table without you having to offer anything, because they're going to leave with more than they came with. I think that's super important. I think mentors and coaches are people that you meet with one-on-one, and while advisory council members could be that, I think you actually want to create a team of people, and sometimes it is good for them all to hear the same thing at the same time, so that as one is poking holes in an idea or affirming an idea, the others can give it a more well-rounded perspective. I've seen my teams actually build off one another. Ultimately, I didn't realize it, but once you do that, what you get is you actually, I call it giving pom-poms to the cheerleaders. You literally put pom-poms in their hands. And once they understand your business from the inside, even if it's imperfect, if they understand what you're trying to do, you'd be amazed at what people will do for you. You'd be absolutely amazed, and with fairly minimal effort.
So good, so good. Someone actually on Facebook said, this has been so good, I had to bring it into Aldi with me. We appreciate you taking us through the aisles of Aldi with you. All right, we have two more questions, and I am big on time, so that's not to you, Ed. You know, you can say, take the time that you want to take, because this is your time I'm being conscious of. All right, so this is also from Trey, actually. Any recommendation on how to identify members of your cabinet? What if you reach out and they aren't interested in helping?
Bye.
There you go.
No, I would not suggest you reach out to strangers for this. So part of this, y'all, the theme in this conversation that I hope that people will take is you have to preserve a level of readiness. So you don't just jump out there and ask people, like, if you don't know me already, don't be calling me to ask me to join your kitchen cabinet, because we don't have a relationship. And what you want to do is start nurturing a relationship. It can start with something as simple as interacting on LinkedIn, which I hope everybody will find me there, and let's make sure we're connected. Or it could be something more like being invited to coffee, because Jackie and I like coffee. And I'm always open to that, as well as a lot of open-minded people are. But there are people that simply are not going to be interested. I would argue that many people wouldn't even believe that they're qualified to advise you. That's more on them. That's not on you. You've got to help people see why you see value in them and their advice. I think that's very important. I had actually invited my pastor at the time to serve on my advisory council, not for business purposes, but because it was my own business. I wanted to make sure that it was covered. And so, you know, that was his particular value. So you can think outside the box. You might even think about a young person to come along and be on your advisory council, because maybe they have a unique perspective that just keeps you honest with what you're doing. So be very open, be very broad about it. You can't really get it wrong because it's yours, but you really want to maximize the value of that opportunity.
That's good. You gotta invite them into the house first before you invite them into the cabinet. So no strangers off the street into your kitchen cabinet. That's a little personal.
I like that.
At least bring them into the house and ask them if they like something to drink first, like coffee. The person who asked about the book said thank you very much. So I wanted to make sure we acknowledge that. Thank you. And it looks like Porter has a question that's very specific to him, and it's about presenting you an idea and seeing if you can help. And I know that you just said that you hope everyone will connect with you on LinkedIn, and I think that that may be a great space for him to potentially attempt that. And so I would like for you to tell us how we find you, how people can contact you. I know here in Zoom, Katricia is doing a wonderful job of giving us links and information. So LinkedIn is your preferred connection spot.
It is. We have fun out there. We're also very active with the mayor's office LinkedIn page. Stay attached there for updates. Things like the City Hall recycling program and others that are relevant to you all. Please find me on my blog at Medium. If you're not a part of the Medium universe, you can find some really cool information out there among a whole universe of writers and journalists and people who just got things on their mind. I'm one of those people. So find me at medium.com/iChiefStrategy. I rarely post city-specific items out there, but I will from time to time. So find my insights there. And then, of course, I referenced the city website earlier. So I'm hoping that you all can find Katricia's link that she shared there. My final note to you is on painting the walls. Dr. Lonnie Strickland, he was a very interesting character at the University of Alabama. He taught the strategy capstone course, and he used to talk about walking into a room, walking into a space, and the room is totally dark and you cannot see anything, but that there's a bucket of paint sitting there in a corner. And that in order for you to actually illuminate the room, there's no light bulb. The only way that you can illuminate the room would be to paint the walls. And so painting the walls actually was a framework, strategic framework. And again, I have this document here that goes through all the basics of good strategic planning, but that each one of the walls that you paint represents a different phase, whether that's internal, getting to know yourself and going through all the things you go through, or external, really getting to understand the environment. And by the time you finish painting the walls, then you can decide what goes in the room. Too often we jump right into what it is we want to do because we have an idea, but we really haven't truly assessed the world around us. And even as the world around us spins a little bit off of its axis these days, it's still spinning. The world has not stopped spinning. People have not stopped spending. Yes, there's a lot more trepidation, but I would say to you, be ye encouraged. So many of us have the power to choose how we show up in this moment. I want you to focus on your vision, and I want you to double down. If it's a noble vision, if it is a just cause, I want you to double down on that. And I want you to rally every resource you have around that in a way that can be productive, both financially, spiritually, emotionally, and socially for you, to make it work for you. But you can't be lazy about it. And I think that a lot of people just got a gut punch and they want to sit on their couch with their Netflix and some new flavors of Bluebell I've been seeing, by the way, and just, waiting for things to get to some form of normalcy. We cannot afford to do that. Our system is not set up to benefit small businesses. Our system is not set up to benefit people of color. And if you are any one of those people, you've got to keep your ass in gear right now. And you don't have to do that alone. Please consider Jackie Jones. If I can just put you out there like that, consider her a helpful resource. I'm happy to connect with you as well, but I think she's got a network around her that believes in her, that will rally for her if she makes a call. So use your bridging capital that she provides. And I just want to encourage you all to stay encouraged. This is not a moment to be overly technical. This is a moment to be overly human and to be really, really in tune with that right now. The more that you are, I believe that the more that you will benefit. So thank you all for allowing us to put people first here at the City of Birmingham and for the time. Please follow us and connect with us. I would love your insights and your feedback on anything that I've shared here. And there's so much more that we can share. Oftentimes, I frankly don't know where to start because there's so much happening. I would love to be able to share more with you all going forward. So please reach out to me and let me know what you're not hearing from us that you believe you should be hearing. I'll be sure to share that with our leadership team as well.
Awesome. I'm so grateful. And yes, I am here for all of you. I can even bridge you to the company that did that assessment he was talking about because they're a client of mine. So I was like, I don't know if I should shout them out because he didn't. So I'm not going to because you didn't. I don't know any rules around that. But
you did a good job. It's okay. They did a good job.
They did a wonderful job, I'm sure, because they're awesome people. But thank you again for your time, for your energy, for your advice, for all the things that you gave us today, your presence. We do not take it lightly, this time that you have given us. There will be a replay. It will likely be up in just a few hours. I will send that over to your office for you to share at your leisure. And we will be posting it here through the Create Birmingham channels as well. So for everyone who has joined us here on Facebook, thank you so much for being here, your time, and we will see you at the next community conversation. Y'all have a great day.
Peace.